Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, Out of Voice Radio. So today, we are starting a new type of video that, if it proves fairly popular, will be coming around again and again and again. I like this idea. We are doing a tournament roundup. This past weekend in Dallas, I was at the regional championships. It was amazing. It was an internationals size tournament. It had a ridiculous number of players. 1,052 masters turned up. So I thought what we should do is have a quick video where we go through everything we can learn, all the key stories as it were. We round up this particular tournament. Now this was expanded. Leipzig did happen in standard this weekend. We're going to be rounding that one up tomorrow. But to start off with the headline here, it's really simple. Zoroark. Zoroark was the headline, ladies and gentlemen. It was by far the most popular card, the most popular deck. It was absolutely everywhere. And in round one, I walked up and down the tables looking at what everyone was playing, and there was Zoroarks as far as the eye could see. If we look at the top four, in first place, Riley Holbert with Zoroark. Second place, Isaiah Williams with Zoroark. Third place, James Taylor with Zoroark. And fourth place, Kid Stark with Zoroark Lycanroc. Now, we're not going to sit and dissect all of the lists today. I will do videos on any of these lists which are worth having a good look at. But there really are a couple different types of lists which I wanted to talk about. So if we look, for instance, at the third place list, Riley Holbert's list, we see Zoroark, but we also see it with a Lowland Muck. This was a very popular tech in Zoroark lists throughout the weekend. And the reason is very simple. It turns off the abilities of basic Pokemon. That means no Shaman. That means no Tapu Lele. But it also means no Marshadow in Night March decks, which of course would hit for weakness and be very bad. It means no Execute in the Mirror Match, which means that your opponent is really hurt by this. And of course, the other cards we see here in a lot of these decks, Seismitoad, you play one just for certain matchups like Night March, and also Sudowoodo when there's so much Zoroark around. And when Zoroark is really relying on having a large bench, having a Pokemon which puts your opponent to 4 bench Pokemon max is pretty good. The other kind of Zoroark list we really saw can be shown in Isaiah Williams' second place list. It played 4 Execute. And the reason here is incredibly simple. It's that propagation ability, which in Zoroark decks does 2 amazing things. The ability says once per turn you can pick up Execute from your discard pile and put it into your hand. But what's really cool here is that it resets every time. So every time it hits the discard, you essentially get to do it again. So you can have 1 Execute in the discard pile, pick it up and trade with 1 Zoroark. Then pick it up and trade with another Zoroark. Then pick it up and trade with a third Zoroark. And then pick it up and put it on the bench. Now, Zoroark, of course, does 20 damage for every Pokemon on its side of the field, so you want as many Pokemon as you can. One thing, of course, that you need to play here is Skyfield, and that's all well and good, but sometimes Skyfield will be replaced. Maybe by another stadium, maybe even by Parallel City, which was very popular this weekend and reduced your opponent's bench to 3, or maybe even with a good old-fashioned Field Blower. And even when you draw into another Skyfield, one of the challenges as a Zoroark player is to then build up your bench to 8 Pokemon. So what you do is your opponent replaces Skyfield, you lose 3 bench spots. You discard your free Execute on the bench, and then hopefully the next turn you draw into a new Skyfield, you put all those Execute back onto your bench, and it's a way of making sure you've always got a full bench. And that's important, because a full bench means that with a choice band you're hitting 210, which does get some Pokemon in the format like Golisopod, but probably more importantly, it gets an opposing Zoroark. So we saw some decks that were played with a Lowland Muck and usually a Seismitoad or 2, but we saw some decks that were really Zoroark Execute, which was really, really fun. Now, we did see some other Zoroark variants, and I'm not going to go through in great detail. I've talked about most of them on the pod at some point or other. There's Delisopod, which we did see. There was a deck which played it with counter energy and a whole bunch of different Pokemon, and I don't want to be too look at me, look how great I am, but I did make a video about counter energy right before Dallas Regionals, and in that video I talked about a whole bunch of Pokemon you could use with counter energy, which largely featured in that counter energy deck. Go me, essentially. We saw Zoroark played with Vileplume by a couple of people, just making sure that your opponent can't play any item cards. Neither can you, but you've built your deck to be able to withstand it. Zoroark was absolutely everywhere, and the story of the weekend was very much Zoroark. Then again, if you take a Stage 1 Pokemon that can hit for 210 for a single energy attachment, then give it an ability that draws 2 cards when you discard one from your hand, it's probably not surprising that it becomes this amazing card. But one deck that made a big comeback this weekend, and this was both surprising and delighting to me, is Drampa. Ladies and gentlemen, Drampa came back, and it came back in a big way. If we look at the results from Dallas Regionals, it took 6th place with Jimmy Pendarvis, 7th place with Brad Curcio, and 8th place with Igor Costa. Now, I know that they only made top 8, but you essentially had 4 people playing this list. The other one was Azul Garcia Grigo, who made 28th. All 4 of them made it to day 2, 3 of them made it into top 8. When you have one list that's that good, and hopefully I'll get a chance to cover this list later on over the weekend in more detail, you know you're onto a winner. Now, obviously, you've got Drampa here. Drampa's really good at the moment because there are so many decks that are really relying on special energy like double colorless. For instance, if we were to look at, I don't know, let's say Riley Holbert's winning Zoroark list from Dallas Regionals, he played 4 double colorless. Or if we were to look at Isaiah Williams' 2nd place list from Dallas, he was playing 4 double colorless. So Drampa for 1 energy on a basic, being able to discard it, really good. Then you build in Big Wheel GX, which is just this brilliant attack that lets you shuffle your hand in and draw 10 more cards. You know you don't want to do that. It's not ideal. But then again, if you've got nothing and you're about to lose the game, you know what? It's very much worth doing. These decks also played Tauros, a Pokemon which really did fall out of favor but is apparently coming back. Again, it's for a double colorless energy, which this deck does play. And you can either use Horn Attack for 60, which happens to be the perfect amount to KO a lot of basic Pokemon, like, for instance, Zorua. And then if your opponent hits you, you've got either Rage, which does 20 damage, plus however much is on you, or Mad Bull, which does 3 times however much is on you. That's really good. Then, of course, you play it with Garbodor, and you go for the 2-2 Garbodor split. 2 of the ones that stop your opponent having any abilities, and 2 of the ones that do 20 damage for every item in your opponent's discard pile. Garbodor really fell off the map for a little while here, despite being amazing, and I said this was going to happen. As soon as Garbodor goes away, people start playing more items, and as soon as people start playing more items, that's okay, because then Garbodor can come in and start wrecking face. It's an incredibly good deck that was an awful lot of fun, and like I say, 4 people played this list, 3 of them made top 8, the other one made top 32. That sounds all right to me. I should mention one other big card in this particular deck, and that was Parallel City. Parallel City, the main use here is it puts your opponent down to 3 bench spaces. Against something like a Zoroark that, like I've said, is so reliant on having a large amount of bench Pokemon, it just gets awesome. The other big success I want to talk about from Dallas is Wailord. I say success, Wailord's an odd one. The highest ranked Wailord player was Drew Kennett, who came 23rd with Wailord. And in terms of people that made day 2, that's the only one. But then we see another 9 in top 64. 10 of the 64 best decks at Dallas Regionals were Wailord. Now, I say Wailord, it does play a few other cards in there. It plays Wishy-Washy, which has a different weakness, and it plays Xurkitree to protect against people who only use special energy. It's not as good as it sounds, because you can always just use Hex Maniac and then KO Xurkitree, which is why Xurkitree is just not as good in Expanded as it is in Standard as a walling Pokemon. But I was kind of surprised to see how Wailord did quite so much good. Now, the reason is very simple. People who aren't prepared for Wailord lose to Wailord. Wailord sits there with 250 HP, playing all kinds of supporters that just frustrate your opponent. I say supporters, it could be anything. We got Team Rocket's Handiwork to discard cards, and then we've got Max Potion to heal continuously, not to mention all kinds of things like Team Flare Grunt to discard energy. And if we look at something like a Zoroark, Zoroark can't one-hit KO a Wailord. That's big, ladies and gentlemen, because it means you can just heal every turn. Problem is, it's a deck-out deck that doesn't really take prizes, so you would see a bunch of people who started playing Bunnelby, so Bunnelby could just Rototiller over and over again to make sure they never decked out. Whoopsie-daisy. The other big story is Night March just collapsing. Night March was not a particularly widely played deck, at least in terms of success. Daniel Lynch made 12th. Adamusu Williams made 14th. Jason Anachiaro, sorry about the pronunciation, made 26th. Connor Finton made 30th. Alright, so we got a few there in top 32. But looking back at how good Night March has been for a while now, that's actually not very much. And the reason is, everyone's prepared for it nowadays. People are playing a Lowland Muck so that they don't get hurt by things like Marshadow. Unfortunately, when you've got decks like Wailord that can take a hit, when you've got decks like Zoroark that are playing a Alolan Muck so that Marshadow doesn't hit it, you can start to turn this back into your favour. Then, of course, like I say, we got these Drampa decks that between Garbodor hitting quite nicely and turning abilities off can stand up as well. That's not to say Night March is garbage now, but it is to say that the big decks that are seeing a lot of play do have an answer to it. Uh-oh. I don't think Night March has gone anywhere, but in this tournament it wasn't great. So to sum up, Zoroark is everywhere, Night March is falling off, Drampa is back, and Wailord might actually be a legit deck, and that makes me kind of happy. That, ladies and gentlemen, that is a headline from Dallas Regionals. That is the big, broad recap from Dallas Regionals. But as always, any questions you've got, stick them in the comments. Anything you want to say, were you there, what did you see, what did you learn, stick it all down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Go nuts! Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, you can do so by going to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, and make sure you check out Wassy Plays, my video game channel. That would be lovely. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.